So, the Las Vegas Raiders made a big splash when they went and traded the third round draft pick that we traded to get from the New York Jets last year for Davante Adams to the Seattle Seahawks to get Gino Smith to the Las Vegas Raiders to solve the quarterback situation, at least for now. However, the Raiders are now in a bit of a pickle because they have until tomorrow, March 16th, which is a Sunday, in order to sign Gino Smith to a contract extension and renegotiated contract, restructured contract. Otherwise, they're going to be hit with a $16 million roster bonus, which will make sure that they are hit with a $31 million cap hit this year. And so the Raiders need to get this done. And as of right now, it is expected that the Raiders will get it done, but there's no news that that will be done. So what does this mean? If the Raiders don't sign him, that's the deadline. They need to restructure him by tomorrow. So if they don't restructure him and give him a contract extension, does this mean that Geno Smith is a one and done with the Raiders? Are we recycling once again quarterbacks through this system just to spit them out the very next year? I know all of us here in the Raider Nation are getting tired of that type of stuff. However, that being said, this could mean that the Raiders are just taking their time and they're trying to make sure that they get the contract correct. I know that Geno Smith is wanting $40 million a year. Maybe the Raiders are trying to give him $35 million a year. Maybe they're trying to give him $37 million a year. Maybe they're trying to back end all of his salary cap hits so that we still have salary cap to go out and get more free agents this year and next year as well. With that being said, until we know something, we just simply don't know. So let's talk about some things that we do know. And that is the wide receiver and running back class in the 2025 NFL draft. I'm going to go through the top 5 wide receivers in this year's draft, and I'm going to break down each and every single one of the top 2025 NFL draft running backs in this draft, because that is a need that the Raiders absolutely have to get correct this year. But before we do that, I do want to just thank today's sponsor, Vtoman. Vtoman makes some of the coolest solar generators, because they're soulful and they come out with the sun. The solar generators from Vtoman are absolutely outstanding, and they also have solar panels. Behind me, I have 800 combined watts, plus over on the generator shed, I have another 400 watts of Vtoman solar, and it is absolutely awesome. Listen, the old saying is, once you go black, you never go back. Well, once you go solar, you never want to tie back to the grid, because owning your own power is empowering, and I absolutely love it. When we bought this property out in the high desert, as you know, there's no neighbors around us and there is no infrastructure. So we knew from the very beginning that we were going to be 100% off grid. And we started out with just a simple generator from Harbor Freight, which broke down an awful lot. In fact, I had to turn it in 3 times on warranty, and it makes me scared to ever use that thing. However, with solar, it is so much more reliable. There's so many less moving parts. And with the LifePo 4 batteries that you can get from Vtoman with their Jump 1800 and their 1500 series and their 1000 series, you basically are unlimited in what you can do. And we would not be able to do what we're doing. Even just uploading these videos to YouTube requires electricity, and without Vtoman, we don't have any. So thank you, Vtoman, for sponsoring this channel, believing in the channel, just like you, Raider Nation. And so the links are down in the description, and I'll pop some up here in the shopping cart as well. Go and check them out, guys. If you want to get into solar, it's a great place to start because their prices are unbeatable. So let's start off talking about the wide receivers that the Raiders could possibly go out and draft in the 2025 NFL draft. Number 1 off the board is Tet McMillan out of Arizona. The guy is a prototypical big body contested catch X receiver. The dude is probably the best wide receiver, true X wide receiver in this class. Now, if you compare him to last year's class of wide receivers, he's probably the third or fourth guy taken off the board, but unquestionably he is the first wide receiver that will be taken off the board unless some GM just doesn't know what they're doing, because of the fact that the dude is such a big body. He's got speed for his size, and he just gets open. He's really a great route runner, and he has really soft hands, and his contested catch ability is going to be a huge plus whatever team is going to draft him. And that's why I think that if he is still available at pick number 6, it's going to be a very difficult decision for the Raiders, because what do? Do you go and get a guy like Tet McMillan if Shedeur Sanders is still there, and especially if you haven't signed or restructured a longer term deal with Gino Smith? Or do you draft your quarterback of the future in Shedeur Sanders? Or do you pass up on a generational running back that we're going to talk about here in just a minute? So this is going to be a very tough decision. I think because this wide receiver class is much weaker than last year's, I think if Tet McMillan is there, I think the Raiders kind of have to go with him, because you cannot pass on having an X wide receiver when the Raiders don't actually have one. Now, I know we have Jacoby Myers, and he can play X wide receiver, and he can get you 1,000 yards. But the problem is, Jacoby Myers is not one of those guys that is going to strike a lot of fear into NFL defenses. He's going to get his yards, he's going to get his catches, and he's going to make his plays. There's no doubt. But when you compare him to the elite wide receivers that are in the NFL right now, I just don't see that he's up there. I think he is elite, but I don't think he's top 5 elite. And I think that if you go and you get a Tet McMillan with his big catch ability, his big play ability, and the fact that defenses are going to have to really respect him, which is going to take attention off of Brock Bowers, I think you kind of got to go there. And then you can move Jacoby Myers into where he's really elite, which is that slot wide receiver, and you can move him around on the line. McMillan is absolutely the best wide receiver in this class, and he'll be the first wide receiver off the board. Will it be the Raiders? Only time will tell. I want to talk about another wide receiver that the Raiders really need to take a look at, and that is a guy called Luther Burden III. Luther Burden III is an explosive playmaker. Now, one of the downsides with him, and I'll get this off the bat because this is what everybody's going to talk about, is his size. At only 6 foot tall, Luther Burden is a bit on the short size as a wide receiver. However, his explosive playmaking ability and his hands and route running is off the charts, and a lot of draft boards have him going in the mid first round to late first round. However, Luther Burden could fall to the Raiders in the second round. And so if the Raiders were not to pick up a guy named Tet McMillan, who is almost assuredly going to be an all-pro in the NFL, then you still have some options out there. And Luther Burden III, in my opinion, is going to be a great option. The only downside, like I said before, is the fact that he's only 6 foot tall. But he put up over 1,300 yards and a dozen or so touchdowns. The dude is just such an explosive playmaker out on the field that defenses will have to key in on him. And this will be, again, another great thing for Brock Bowers to get the eyeballs off of him, because you're going to have to pay attention to Luther Burden III. So if the Raiders were to draft him, that would definitely be a big bonus to that wide receiver room. So the next guy I want to talk about is Emeka Egbuka, a guy out of Ohio State. So he's going to have a ton of familiarity with our offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly. Emeka is one of those guys who is an absolute polished wide receiver. He excels in the slot position. Now, we have Jacoby Myers, so that's really going to be our slot wide receiver. So I don't know that the Raiders would draft Emeka. However, the ability that he has is something that the Raiders should absolutely take a notice of. If you're going to go and try and turn Jacoby Myers into your X wide receiver, which, you know, he can absolutely do the job, there is no doubt about that, then bringing in Emeka makes sense, because he's going to replace him at the slot position, and that is where he excels. There is no doubt about it. And so He put up over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, and again, the familiarity that he has with Chip Kelly is going to be a big bonus, and I guarantee you he is definitely on the Raiders draft board if he is available in the second round. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, though, and that is the fastest wide receiver in this year's combine. That's Matthew Golden, a guy who played for Texas and really showed out there with over nearly 1,000 yards. I think it was at 969 or something like that. But he is an absolute nightmare. He is explosive. He by far was the fastest wide receiver in the combine. One guy did beat him by 1/10 of a second, I believe, but he was a cornerback. And so Matthew Golden, he could be the golden child for the Las Vegas Raiders and be that explosive over-the-top playmaker that the Raiders have been looking for a long time. The only problem is he's only 6 foot tall. So, I mean, he's only like 1 inch taller than Trey Tucker, and we already have a speedy over-the-top wide receiver. But you cannot deny the athleticism of the golden child in Matthew Golden. His raw speed is outlandish. And unlike some speedy wide receivers, he has great hands. And he goes up and gets contested balls, even though he's only 195 pounds and 6 foot tall. Now, you could put a little bit of weight on him once he gets to the NFL. The fear there is, though, that would maybe slow him down. And you don't want to take any of the burners off of a guy like Matthew Golden. So I think if Matthew Golden is available in the third round, the Raiders got to take a look at him. You know, sometimes a man's just got to take out the trash. But the last guy on this list is anything but trash. We're going to be talking about Vtoman. I really hope I pronounced his name right because it is very difficult. The Canadian project is an absolute standout with Standard this past year. And since coming to Stanford, he has really excelled there. He's a big body guy at 6'3". And over 215 pounds. He can absorb those hits in the NFL, and he has decent speed at a 4.40. So Vtoman is another prospect that the Raiders need to take a look at. His strengths are his ball tracking ability, his being able to extend plays and extend the field by getting that deep threat shot down in the end zone and stuff like that. One of the issues against him is his yards after the catch. He does tend to kind of go down instead of keep the wheels churning. And so if he can just fix that, he's really an all well-rounded wide receiver. And it is a guy that the Raiders could pick up in day 2 in the second round or third round where he is projected. But who would I be if I didn't talk about the best running back in the NFL draft that the draft has seen in decades? Yes, we're going to be talking about Ashton Jeanty as we start talking about this running back class that the Raiders will be looking at. Ashton Jeanty, I mean, by now everybody knows who he is. He is a household name, and he will continue to be a household name in the NFL because he is that dang good. At 2,600 yards on the season and like 5 million touchdowns, the dude is unbelievable. He is one of those guys who is just so hard to tackle, and if you listen to his own words, he represents that untackleability from a guy that is near and dear to the Raider Nation in Marshawn Lynch.
My first earliest running back that I watched was Marshawn Lynch when he was on the Seahawks. And I just loved the way he run, like how hard he ran, those crazy runs, breaking 5-6 tackles. Yeah. And I was like, man, I want to make some runs like that when I get older.
So I'm not going to get too heavy into Ashton Jeanty because we already have heard it. We know it. We would be all excited to see Ashton Jeanty with the Raiders and being the human wrecking ball that he is, just, pinballing off of people and scoring touchdowns for the Raiders. That will be phenomenal. But let's talk about another guy that the Raiders need to take a look at if Ashton Jeanty is not available or we go quarterback or wide receiver. So let's talk about Omarion Hampton as I get my Cougar out of the way here. You guys ever met Cougar? This is Cougar. Cougar, say hi to Raider Nation. It's my little Cougar. He is still a baby, but he's going to grow up to be a monster. All right, guys, let's talk about Omarion Hampton here just real quick. because Omarion Hampton is one of those big body running backs that just absolutely plows over everybody. He's got explosiveness, he's got vision, he's got patience. He is a true running back through and through. From day one, he will be your starting running back. There is absolutely no doubt about it if the Raiders were to draft him. And because this draft class with running backs is so deep, you could literally still get him in the second round. And I think that that would just be perfect for the Las Vegas Raiders if we were to miss out on the future Hall of Fame Ashton Jeanty. Well, there's also the stalwart out of Iowa named Caleb Johnson. This kid is a wrecking ball. He's a bowling ball. He just runs through tackles. The fact that he was able to pick up over 1,500 yards and like 20 touchdowns, the dude is absolutely phenomenal and definitely a day 2, day 3 pick that the Raiders could certainly go and pick up. But he's not the only one out there, because there's also the Ole Miss project, and that is Quinshon Judkins. He is a north-south runner, a power back, a guy that just loves to run over and bulldoze people. Another guy that is going to be a day 2 type of a draft pick. He is a guy that can come in and be an immediate starter on your team, and the Raiders definitely will have this guy on their draft board. And then there's Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. He's a 5'8", 200-pound running back with a lot of speed, a lot of vision. The guy absolutely is a playmaker, and he's going to get a lot of things done in the NFL. So here is a guy that you could probably pick up in the 3rd round, and he is definitely going to be competing to be a starter for any team that is going to draft him, including the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't think he's good enough or big enough to be an every down back. He's not explosive enough to be, an all-pro type of running back, but in the 3rd round, picking up a running back of his caliber, that's going to be a steal. And even though that covers the 5 running backs, we're going to throw in a 6th guy, TreVeyon Henderson out of Ohio State, the Buckeyes. Another guy who's going to have a lot of familiarity with Chip Kelly and his system. A guy that is extremely an explosive running back with a lot of receiving back potential. So TreVeyon Henderson is another guy that's probably going to be picked up in the mid to late 2nd round, and could go further. I mean, it just depends. Like, everybody is different, but in my opinion, Henderson is a guy that is a 2nd round pick. You never know what teams are going to do, but I'm going to say mid to late 2nd round pick. The Raiders could definitely draft him there. We could trade back. There's so many different options. But if you bring in a TreVeyon Henderson, he's already familiar with Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly is familiar with him. And Chip Kelly is going to have a lot of say in whether or not the Raiders should bring a guy like Henderson in. But with that being said, he is an absolute playmaker and a guy that you could make your starting running back right off the gate. He has enough size, he has enough capability, he has great vision, and he has great run ability. Guys, if you like these types of videos from me, the Raider D here at the Raider D Podcast, why haven't you subscribed yet? Hit that subscribe button. Congratulations, you made it to the end of a video, because most of you only make it to about the halfway point. So I appreciate you and salute Raider Nation. I'll see you in the next video.